Hi, this is Frank of Frank Makes, and we're starting the basement project. So this is the central basement room in our house. We're now starting to work on the basement. I've fixed up my office. We've got the guest room kind of fixed up, the sort of secondary shop, train room, basement storage, garage room, which is over that way, is mostly together. So now we want to start working on this central room. We've kind of cleared out the junk that was in here, or at least a lot of it. But the first thing I want to do is to take out these benches that are along the outside wall. They're kind of, they've seen better days. They're painted blue. They kind of don't really fit in real well. And it'll give us a little more space kind of further towards the outside. So that's kind of the first task, is to do that. So I'd like to do a video about demolition. Most remodel projects start with at least a little bit of demo work. And the little bit of demo work we're going to do is to take this bench out. So I haven't really decided, is it better to try and pull the whole thing away from the wall or try and pull bits of it off? So I think I'm going to try and pull bits of it off and see how it's put together, and we'll see how it goes from there. So you can see I can just get the hammer into that opening and then use the leverage of the handle to just pull it apart. And then it just comes apart pretty easily. And kind of understanding how the direction of the nails work. And that it's much easier to pull a nail out directly than it is to try and shear it off. I mean, you almost can't do that. Am I not trying to really damage anything and just pulling the connection apart? Things tend to just come right apart. You do want to be careful of the nail. It helps when you hit something to look at what's moving when you're hitting it. So like I'm hitting this, and it's coming up off the floor. So it's not, I don't think it's attached to the floor, but me hitting on it isn't doing anything. So that's kind of useless. But I've opened up a tiny opening. If I can get something in there, then we're done. Yeah. And kind of look at the seam. I think it looks like the seat is in front of the back. So if I pull it up, the back's not going to be holding the seat down. So the back was on top of the seat, I would take the back off first, I think. Where you can pound, and you're actually pounding a nail out, then it makes sense to hit things. You'll see in this process that I really like to use leverage over hitting things. Okay, we can't get overly excited and start into the next system. So I really need to get this little bit off before I can really take the back off. I find I really like to use the pry bar or the crowbar. It's pretty much the tool that I use for doing demo work. Now I don't think I want to damage this piece of trim. So I want to hopefully get the back part out without damaging this trim. I don't think there's any nails or anything going between those two things. Now you see I'm pushing on the window sill, I guess, under the window and not on this piece of trim. Okay, I'm going to turn this fan on, and this will blow the air out. So it will keep the air in the basement clean by drawing air from the rest of the house down to the basement and out. And it'll keep the dust from the work down here in the basement from getting into the rest of the house. These end panels look like they were put in before the door was put in. So they actually go behind and into the wall. So I think I'm going to have to cut those off. Now that I have the skin of the bench off, I can take all of these rib pieces out. It seems like every video and TV show about demo work starts with someone hitting a wall with a sledgehammer. And this makes great video and great storytelling, but it's really not the best way to do demo work. I think taking the care to understand how something's been put together and taking the same care that you would use to put something together to take something apart, you can easily pull something apart just with the leverage of the pry bar. Okay, so this is where I can change the fulcrum on the lever. I'm about as far as I can go. If I slip this in under there, I can then get that force into the right place. With all of these rib pieces being similar, I got better and better at pulling them out as I practiced on each one. Along with the pry bar, it's really good to have some blocks of wood so that you can move the fulcrum on the lever and get kind of the best force into the piece that you're trying to remove. It's one of those things that's hard to explain, but once you do it and feel how easy it is to pull something apart, it really makes a lot of sense. On this side, the end panel came right out. There was a piece of drywall sort of on the lower part of the bench that I could just pull out. Then it was just a matter of cleaning up and pulling out the last few nails that were in the wall. One thing that's cool about demolition is that you can make a lot of progress really quickly. So it feels like you're getting a lot done. So you might not want to watch this part. I put a small saw blade on my grinder, and that allowed me to cut these little end panels out. So the piece that was behind the door frame just stayed in place, and I could cut it flush with the studs of the wall. It's not the safest operation in the world, but it went fine. No one got hurt. There was a little bit of paneling at the end where the bench ended, and there's an old cat door in the wall that I'm just going to cover up as our cats stay inside at this point. And I know it's there if we ever want to cut a hole at that place for the cats. There was a little bit of bench on the other side, and I could take that out the same way. There are wires down here, and they're hot. Well, I guess it's bad that there's just a wire down here, but good because it means I can put power in this wall. The wood paneling runs back here. I was afraid it was going to end and I was going to have to patch that back bit in. I got caught on the corner trim at the floor here, and it turned out there was a nail that I was trying to shear off, and that's what was holding it in place. When you're doing this, it's good to pull against the nails in the same direction that the nails were put in, and then the nails will come out. Trying to shear a nail is almost impossible. So in putting this back together again, I salvaged some of this tongue and groove material from the ceiling in the back of the basement, and it's the same material that's on the walls down here in the basement. So I can patch in where the bench was with this material. Now I thought about pulling out this insulation and putting in new insulation, but it would only be slightly better, and then I'm throwing out a bunch of stuff and buying a bunch of new stuff. So I figured I'll just leave the existing insulation. To get this to fit, I cut off the tongue on the top here, and that'll get it to fit at this end, and it'll get it to fit to set nicely against the bottom of the window. Now I think normally one would start at the bottom and work their way up, but because I want this to match at the top, I think I'll start at the top and work my way down. I just used finish nails to hang the wood on the wall. I had to cut around for the new outlet that I put in. I just marked where that was and then cut a notch on the bandsaw. It's sort of nice having the wood shop to do the work for this. I was also finding for all of these cuts and the cuts for the length, I would have to run the piece into the wood shop and then back out and measure and back in and back out and back in and back out. I did a lot of walking between the house and the shop. I learned to figure out several cuts in the house. So when I went into the shop, I would only have to make one trip. That would cut down on the number of trips I make back and forth between the house and the shop. And at this point, the kids are practicing their instruments. That's what that sound is in the background. So I put the short side on first, and that went just fine. That's something I didn't notice at this point because I was using full lengths of wood with no seams vertically. What I didn't notice is that some of them aren't as wide as others, but in doing this side, that didn't matter. And I cut a strip for that bottom piece. The short section, I didn't put up a vapor barrier. I sort of didn't think I really needed to, and then in thinking about it more, I thought maybe it'd be a good idea. So on the longer side, I put up a vapor barrier. It's just a sheet of plastic stapled to the studs. I did the same thing where I cut the tongue off of the top piece, and that let it sit up against the windowsill nicely. Now this wall didn't have any outlets or anything in it, so it was all straightforward. But like I was saying before, I hadn't noticed some of these pieces are different widths, so I put a piece or two on, and then I'd get to the third piece, and it wouldn't be the same width, and I'd end up with a gap in the horizontal seam. So after that happened once, I started to check, and I would make sort of a little set of pieces to make each row. So I was going back and forth between the house and the shop and cuts. I was going to set up a saw closer to the house, but my radial arm saw was actually making nice vertical joints. And I figured I wouldn't mess with what was working. I had talked about how it usually takes a lot longer to put something back together that you've demoed. This wall actually went together really quickly, and it really didn't take any longer than it took to take the bench out. Although we still have to do the floor. And we may put a clear finish on this as well. But we'll do that when we're working on the room as a whole. I used the pry bar to sort of push the final piece up into position with just a little bit of force. I'm not wrenching down on this. So I was nailing the top of each board, then putting the next board in. Then when the lower board was in, I could put the nails in the board that was above on the bottom. And then I cut a little strip on the bottom, which will most likely get covered with a little piece of baseboard when we finish up the room. And that little project is done. So I took the bench out and then patched the wall behind it. And it actually looks pretty good, and it goes with the rest of the room. The plan is we'll be working on the basement this summer. So there should be a set of videos in this series over the summer. sprinkled with some other projects from the shop.